This event is brought to you by World Pro Racing, the Malta Motorsport Federation, GMR Entertainment, WJ England & Son, Melita, Media Looks, Restream.io, Gaming Malta, visitmalta.com, and TVM Sport. This stream is powered by Melita, using Melita Gigapower Internet. World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
This is so dangerous. You are risking not only your life, but also my life.
wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI-assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi, assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
There's nothing more symbolic in what is the 2020s now that we find ourselves in than endurance racing in GT3 category vehicles. 4 rounds, 5 weeks, and 1 winner will be crowned. This is your HyperX Endurance Series, and it is here live with World Pro Racing on YouTube, on Facebook Live, on Twitch, with ESTV, with TVM Sport, and with Motorsport TV as well. We kick off the first leg of 4 here in this event, and that, of course, takes us to one of the great circuits, one of the most imaginative circuits available. Unfortunately, it's not the one where we head through the green hell, but what we do have is a very unique modern take on an old classic today. It's Beswick layout here today for the Nurburgring as our opening exchange of the season. My name is Jake Sperry. Joined alongside me here today, as always, is Nicholas Hillerbrand, and we find ourselves just 3 minutes away from the start of practice getting itself underway. And if you have not already, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to World Pro Racing for more amazing action. And if you want to become a sim racer, if you want to get in on weekly casual events or get into some professional sim racing, head over to worldproracing.com right now and sign yourself in for some great sim racing events coming up. But focus here to the Nurburgring, the first round of 4, Nicholas, and this is all about setting a benchmark. A classic track, a classic place to go out and race. It's all about who can test themselves at what is a very, very traditional GT3 circuit.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jake, for the introduction. And as you said, it's not the big one with the Green Hell, but the Nürburgring GP circuit definitely has not anything to be sneezed at. 5.1 kilometers long, a bit longer than that, 5,148 meters overall. We're going to have a 90-minute race here, and the average lap times are 1 minute 55, around that benchmark. So we're going to expect over 40 laps here. So quite something, quite a difference in distance to our usual race distances.
Well, it's quite a distance, of course, 90 minutes, and it's not just a 90 minutes here today with Gran Turismo Sport, because we have ourselves a little bit of a difference, some would say, to what is a normal Gran Turismo event. Of course, the tyre life has been accelerated to 5 times the weight of rate of wear, actually, I should say right now. You've also got that wear that has been going on in terms of the fuel as well. That will be going down at 3 times the normal rate of that also. So this is going to be a very interesting concept where we are expecting pit stops. We are expecting a lot of strategy to be brought into the action here today. And it's worth noting as well here, Nicholas, there's a lot of prizes on store for those who get a top 3 finish overall.
Yeah, most definitely. The HyperX Endurance Championship is, of course, sponsored by, as it says in the title, HyperX. But there are plenty more prizes in this series for the top 3. So, yeah, Jake, why don't you give us the rundown?
Well, I will give us the rundown. We are just about to jump over to practice, though, ladies and gentlemen, in the next couple of seconds and see who are the contenders and who are the pretenders here when it comes to racing. As we can see right now, familiar face, there is Kyokudo at the fantastic top of the times as things stands, 153.8 at the moment, driving around in the Lexus, and I've had an opportunity actually to see one of those GT3 Lexuses myself over in Switzerland at the Sim Racing Academy that is there by a fantastic group of people around the likes of, say, the group at the Fuel Racing Academy, I think it is the name of. But we have ourselves some brilliant action that will be going on today. And, of course, those prizes, which we have right now. First prize, or the winner overall of this, will get the Cloud Alpha S Blackout, an Alloy Elite 2, a Pulsefire Surge, and a Fury SL mousepad. Second position gets a Cloud Alpha S Blackout and an Alloy FPS RGB Silver Switch. And those who get third place get the Cloud Stinger Core 7-1 wired and the Pulse Fire Surge. So prizes in terms of gear on the horizon for everyone, and this is looking like it's already very chock-a-block for those who are looking to try and get things going. And of course, GT3 category means that we are seeing the balance of performance come into play. There is Mikael in a very, very classic early 2000s Formula One BMW right now, Nicholas, and we are seeing that the big 3 are all here and all ready to play. Mikael, Windy, Kyokudo, this is the elite of Malta.
Yeah, most definitely. They've always been at the front, but of course, some people aren't very far behind. Shelinu always on their tracks, and of course Ilwindi and Daman, of course, who showed himself very competent as well last week. But what is very nice to see right now is that we have quite a bit more variety in the GT3 field at the moment, because of course they have to select a car for multiple different racetracks.
And those multiple different racetracks are going to be very interesting in terms of how this season stacks up. From here at the Nurburgring, we go to the fantastic circuit known as Monza in Italy. It has been a speed demon's paradise time and time again. From there, it's a trip over the Atlantic and into the Southern Americas, because Interlagos, Brazil will be the third round of the championship. And then with a 1 week's break before the season finale, we head to Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps to end out this season, which of course these drivers have all had a very, very big idea of how to run if they have been a couple of minutes ago. They can see the format on screen. We've got 10 minutes of practice for this one here today, moving into a 20-minute qualifying session and then 90 minutes available for racing action. Here is Shelinu running around in the Toyota right now, and we'll be trying to get as much as possible out of this. And there is also that opportunity for some people to really step out of the woodworks. You can't really miss that V12 Vantage being driven by demand. So everybody's going to be looking at what tyres are going to be the best, what strategy is the best. And they can see Shelinu proving something that we haven't seen really at all over the course of racing action that we've seen available. It's a purple super soft tyre that will be available to Shelinu at this point in the event. So all about what can you do, what tyre feels right. There's the soft tyre then going back on for this stint as drivers look to try and understand what is going to work and actually how things are going to work today, because an endurance race like this, there is, from what many drivers have been looking at, I would say at least maybe 2/3 of more opportunity for things to slightly go awry.
Well, that is definitely the case. Endurance racing, of course, is not only a test of speed, but also consistency. And we saw so many times before, when people really start fighting amongst each other, the consistency can go out of the window just because you're so busy just constantly being well, figuratively at each other's throats on track, that you can lose not only just time, but also the control over your car, get some damage, or, damage your tires as well, simply because the tire wear is just so much accelerated here.
It certainly is. This is Ivan here in third position, currently on the times. Kyoto has the fastest time, has just got himself out of session, looking to try and get back in. This is the Emil Frey Racing Lexus at this stage, looking to try and make some good progress. There's the inspiration for the number on the back of the car, moving through the final corner out on circuit. This 120-degree right-hand bend, which leads onto the main straight, which leads to the Mercedes-Benz Arena. Their turn number 1 out on track. There you can see just in the distance, that's Colin, who is in the Porsche, the white Porsche. They're out on track. So a number of different manufacturers there. And there was also Chris Pateri that we just saw for a second. Mr. Colin, they're in the Porsche 911 RS. No surprises there to see Mr. Colin driving one of his favourite vehicles around this place in the 957. But every place becomes one that's worth fighting for. A small grid like this as well today. Only 12 to the dance, some would say. That's going to be another point of contention that we're going to be seeing. Drivers are going to be relying more on their pace and less on, say, the more traditional endurance-style mistakes or pitfalls that come around. And that is, of course, lapped, second word, traffic.
Yeah, I think lap traffic could definitely play into some of the position switches here. And, of course, with 40 laps and everyone driving in the same class, it's not something that you want to bank on, but, well, it's always a factor whether you like it or not, especially with different tire strategies, of course. Some people may go for longer stints, to just keep the tires alive a bit longer, may run a bit lower power setting to keep longer stints going, and hope that overall they gain time in comparison to people who run in the super softs, for example. And yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see the different strategies approach over this over 200-kilometer race distance.
And it's that race distance that we'll be looking at. There is Mikael at the moment in the BMW. So different to the two rivals who have gone to the Lexus, hoping that is going to work for them today. But for the time being, let's talk about this track for a moment, because this is one of those, I would say, tracks that have been around for a very long time. Of course, this layout of the circuit originally came around in 1977 after the Niki Lauda accident, of course, which has been so very, very famously documented over the course of so many, many years. But this track has gone through many different iterations, many different changes, but now it's sort of settled down a bit since the early 2000s. Hasn't seen many changes to what this place is capable of doing, and actually is one of the most prolific challenges that you find for multi-class racing. You could also say this is the one jack of all trades track, which many, many people in many series go over to, race, and have fun with. And there's a reason why the Nurburgring is also one of the leading lights as well when it comes to sim racing as well, with the likes of, say, the Sim Racing Expo that traditionally happens year on year. Didn't quite get the opportunity this year to run one at the Nurburgring, but there should be one virtually over the course of this one, and it was almost about 2 years ago now, and just a little bit over since I last visited a Sim Racing Expo. But the Nurburgring is key, I would say, to the sim racing development of the future.
Yeah, not only that, but I think the Nürburgring also had one of the most iconic opening races, this very, very iconic race, where every one of, I think, pretty much the whole F1 grid, and, at the time, a very young Ayrton Senna, they all raced in identical Mercedes-Benz, pretty much road cars, and everyone was really pushing on their limit, getting new tires and all that, and one Ayrton Senna was basically driving away from pretty much everyone, except for Niki Lauda, who was sort of able to keep pace. But yeah, since 1984 this track has been around, almost 40 years old now, once again, to see how time flies. But yeah, as it started originally, as you said, multiple iterations. Whoever watches the Nürburgring 24 Hours, of course, knows the very old Yokohama S, which is a bit sharper now because of the new track adaptation. But it used to just be a normal chicane. Now, of course, it's replaced with the Mercedes Arena, which is, and pretty much always will be, I think, one of the best places to battle because it's this perfect blend between mid and low speed corners.
It certainly is, and we are just a minute away from heading over towards qualifying around this place, the Nurburgring, and of course the VLN, which ran here just a little earlier in the year, had probably one of the most novel solutions I think I've ever seen to a socially distanced pit lane, which ran all here, there, and everywhere as one of the longest pit lanes, if not the longest pit lane ever. But it is one track which always looks to be up there at the very, very top of many, many different facets of the racing sphere. But today, it's a sim racing battle, and it's who can take the first step towards a championship push when it comes to the HyperX Endurance Series. And something that will be worth keeping in mind in qualifying is how do drivers deal with one driver known as Kyokudo Sentai, because we have seen throughout the past 3 months of racing over the course of 2020, Nicholas, that Kyokudo has been seldom beaten when it has come to racing action.
Yeah, it definitely seems that he is, well, the ultimate in terms of pure pace. But we have seen him get absolutely challenged and him being absolutely on the ropes in the race we had at Bathurst. So I think, especially over the course of this series, we're going to see him get challenged a bit more and a bit more, especially by one of the two men who was challenging him so much, Windy. First of all, we remember him back then in the casual races, showing up with the Beetle, so already sort of a legendary status, I'd say, from back then already, because we have all these GT3 cars, the Lexus, the Audi R8, the Ferrari 458, and then there's just this Beetle that's just fighting for the top positions out of nowhere.
And what's going to be key here in terms of how these drivers have practiced and prepared over, say, a different circuit, they'll be looking at this one going, okay, what vehicle gives us the best overall opportunities in these races? There are a lot of factors that go into how an event like this really does come about. And here, as we go on board with Kyokudo and understand how this track works out, something that is going to be key in terms of driver's choice in terms of vehicles. They'll be looking at how well they can look after the tyres, as in fact we run the Grand Prix layout here today, going through that very, very vintage chicane and over the hard curb on the left-hand side to take as much as possible out of the final corner to start a flying lap. There will also be a big look at fuel usage here today and how much life they can get out of just saving a little bit here and there. On the brakes down then, into the first corner of the Mercedes-Benz Arena, the Yokohama S, you can see the VLN line, they go through the big dip right first, and now you start to flick through the left to turn number 2, which is up the hill, off camber, as you now look for that short run to turn 3. You can make the dive down the inside here, and when you do so, you run the curb nicely, and then you've got this 90-degree right, which comes in from turn 4, always feels a lot tighter than it actually is, and that makes life difficult. A left-right down the hill through the Valvoline and Ford curves, and then you start to think about, okay, what's next? And it's the carousel-esque inspired corner known as the Dunlop Hairpin.
Yes, now making our way down, pretty much just barely off the old Südschleife as well, so the southern loop, which was taken out of contention even before this Grand Prix circuit was made. Now through the south loop, up the hill, and one of the most newly named corners which kept its name through the years, the Michael Schumacher S, of course. Very fast, almost flat out, and now coming to the Ravenel bend, left-hand corner, third gear. He takes a lot of inside curb there to get the maximum run. Now through the Bilstein bend, turn 12. Get on the outside curb a bit, yes, there he is, and to take the maximum possible momentum with him on the back straight through the Advan arch, and now on his way to the Vedol chicane. Of course, there's the faster layout, which, well, endurance users usually, but we have this Grand Prix arch here for a bit of a better overtaking opportunity. Now the last corner, very long known as the Coca-Cola corner, but now known as the Hyundai End Corner, and the highest point of this circuit as well.
And over the line, there is the first time, a 54.4 from Kyoto, half a second clear of Windy there just behind as the first times are looking to come through. Shalinu on a 55.9 goes into fourth position because Mikael has just jumped to the top of the timing stands on a 154.2 at that moment in time. So that was very useful. And there we can see, a classic when it comes to Porsches. It's that classic pig livery that very, very famously won a fantastic endurance event being piloted by Il Windy. That's going to make life very difficult for us. We've got Windy Boy and Il Windy there, but Il Windy in sixth position. Sasha in seventh place at the moment. Just 0.3 of a second off of what is needed to jump up ahead of that Porsche, but crucially is in that range where it can just work out over the course of a 20-minute qualifying session, which after one lap from most drivers here in this session has already been scored as complete. Mikael at the top, the M6 GT3, only driver with that choice.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a bit of a driver preference. A lot of people took the Lexus, which overall, due to the long wheelbase and overall a quite good power band, because it's a big V8 naturally aspirated, no need to trouble yourself with anything like a turbo like Mikael has here. But that should mean normally that Mikael could be a bit better on fuel consumption, because of course turbo engines are a little bit more fuel efficient.
They certainly are, and they are hoping that it's going to work. Very difficult through the Ad Van Bogen corner there from one Mr. Mikael. Had someone in front, of course, that one belonging to Shalinu. That was not going to be very helpful through that point on the track. Kyoto does improve, though, to a 154.3, but crucially enough, with that time, it is not enough to gain pole position, just 1/10 behind. And I wonder if this lap was maybe a little bit slower here from Mikael. The answer is yes, it was. So that one is not going to be any shades of improvement here in this qualifying. Some drivers coming down in, though, and taking stops. Mr. Colin, for example, is coming down in, looking to get some tyres and getting back out there again for another lap, as there is the automated pit system here in Gran Turismo Sport. It's a quicker pit, some would say, as they get tyres, fuel, and get back out again, looking for the best runs possible. There's a Corvette that Chris Pateri is driving. Deman puts a 2-minute 0.8 on the board. That's enough for 10th place, with Kenneth not setting a representative lap time at the moment. But a Corvette, how very nice to see an American car in this field and doing a pretty solid job of things at the moment, you could say, from Chris.
Yeah, most definitely. The C7, of course, through the last around 6 years that it was on the road in the GT and GT3, it's become an iconic sight, so it's very nice all the time to see it, especially in the typical Corvette yellow. And Chris Pateri getting a nice grip on it and slowly starting to find his pace, I'd say, now as he goes through turn 6 and now into the fourth corner, turn 7. So I think he's got still some pace to find in that. He's getting more confident, I think.
And of course here, ladies and gentlemen, there is that opportunity to work out who is going to be the very, very best placed out of all of these drivers here today. So if you have yourself maybe a little bit of time, make sure that you write out in the comments, wherever it may be, where you are watching, who do you think is going to put themselves at the best possible opportunity to win this race outright. Answers on a postcard. You will find out when this race is at its conclusion at the end of 90 minutes worth of racing action. Mikael at the top, it's Kyoto in second, Windy Boy in third place, and Shalinu in fourth. So those are the main contenders that we see at the moment. We're just heading towards the halfway stage now in qualifying, and this is where we've seen drivers put bankers down. But if anything is anything, someone who has been incredibly good in the clutch drives in the late stages of qualifying, well, he's on screen right now driving a Lexus. How on earth do you put together the perfect lap when you have one opportunity only? So Chris Pateri finds improvement, as does Black Sky as well, who moves up into 7th place. Deman jumping up into 6th. So the mid-pack starting to form nicely. We've seen Deman do pretty well, but Black Sky as well. Do not sleep on the effectiveness of how Black Sky runs at the moment in, of course, the Porsche.
Yeah, and of course, we also have to consider that we haven't seen that much from him yet. In the Porsche Cup with the Caymans at Laguna Seca, he was running very good times in the middle of the race, just seemingly out of nowhere. So I think it's really a matter of him getting into the right groove. Some people have it easier with that, and some people, like it seems sometimes with Black Sky, have it a little bit harder. But when they're in the groove, they can really put on a show.
And they're looking to put that show on and hope that it does everything that is needed to make sure that the result is going to be exactly what it needs to be. There is your current pole sitter at the moment, but time, of course, very much of the essence here in this sort of race. And, well, the question will become, what can the likes of, say, Mikhail do here for this one to make this one a reality that is very much played into the part of how so many people want it to be in this one. They want to challenge, they want to fight, they want to see if Kyokudo is going to maybe not have the easiest of times here today, because there are national championships that come into play. There are events which really do start to keep knocking up on the horizon here for a number of drivers, and in this series, a Maltese event right now. What's worth keeping in mind? 2021. That championship, which always seems to be talked about here in these broadcasts, because that's the building blocks. Through endurance racing, this might be a case where you find out, okay, who can not only be the quickest, but consistency, such an underrated value in drivers, and you don't often see it. Ivan jumping to a 55.7 and improving time, which is in 4th position right now for him. So who can find themselves with the most consistency over the course of racing right now here, Nicholas?
I think consistency will be the big key here. And right now, of course, especially with the super soft tires that they have on for this qualifying session, there's a very difficult bit to see the actual consistency of the guys, because right now they're pushing on the utmost limit of the car. And I doubt that anyone will really run the super soft tires in the race by choice, unless, of course, they have to do a last-minute emergency stop with pretty much just 5-6 laps to go. Because, of course, the soft tires, we saw how dramatically they dropped off with accelerated wear. And I think the super soft tires will be even worse with that. So I think how people handle the lap time, or, well, the general track on the harder tires, and how they can keep up their pace throughout the stint, that's going to be the deciding factor in the race.
I certainly seem to agree with you. Windy's starting to find some time. Windy boy up to third, well, stays in third place, but look at the time. It's a 1:54.4 in terms of improvement, as we were looking at Ivan up on screen there. So Windy boy has put a 1.3 second gap between the top three and anybody else out there at the moment. In terms of that, the top three are split by just 0.2 of a second here in qualifying, with 7.5 minutes to go here in this qualifying session, and they will be hoping that there is more. There's the other Windy there with a 56.5 in terms of improvement, stays in 6th position for the time being. But the questions that will be looking to be asked and answered is, how will the super soft tyre look and develop compared to, say, what the soft tyre can do over the course of racing action that we'll be heading to after this qualifying session, Nicholas?
Yeah, the super soft, of course, it says it in the name, super soft. It has a lot softer, just generally consistency of the tire. And that, of course, allows it, especially in corners like here, the Schumacher S. Of course, you have downforce there, but you really need a good tire to keep you on the road properly. And some people just don't get along that well with the added movement. We see Ivan that he is on the soft tires at the moment. So maybe he's just trying to go for a bit of a safer approach, something that's more familiar to him. Meanwhile, the others are trying to get the maximum out of the super soft tires. Of course, you can get better one-lap pace out of it, but these super soft tires will degrade even quicker than the soft tires. So it's going to be quite something to see how they fare with it over the race distance.
And of course, the longer that a race distance goes, the more marbles that build up on the edges of the circuit. Every driver will be trying to search for grip the longer that things go on. But But the questions, of course, with an event like this, is Kyokudo does just find even more time. But again, still not enough. I want to see what the gap has come down to. It's a 54.325. I doubt it's much. He's found himself about 1/100th of a second over that last time compared to Mikhail, who is there in the top of the boards at the moment. The BMW working nicely here at this circuit. And now here's another thing that isn't really talked about with multi-class style racing. There are differences compared to car, but how important is it for momentum's sake, Nicholas, to pick up the win in the opening round of the season, knowing that if, say, you got worse rounds at other places, you are capitalizing on tracks which maybe work for you a bit better?
Of course, when you have the first round, everyone is stressed because they want to get the best result possible right on the table. And they know that this confidence, it's going to boost you for quite a bit. So even if you have a bad second round, you still had a great first round, so you can still push on with the same limit. But of course, it's going to be very alarming to people who know that their weakness is at other tracks, that this is their car's strength, and they don't perform well here. So I think it's a bit of a double-sided sword. You can get a lot of confidence, but of course, if you have a car that's especially good at the Nurburgring and it doesn't fare so well at other tracks, and you are really banking on a good result here, and in the end you have a bit of an accident or whatever could happen to you, it could cause you extra stress.
It certainly could, and these drivers are looking to have the most stress-free runs today here at this Nürburgring track. There is Chris Spiteri going through turn 4, and there is pole position changing Kyokudo to a 54 flat, and that is something really special, because it's not often that you put lap upon lap upon lap here that goes on through, and then you get exactly what the run is. So that from Kyokudo to go 2/10 clear is fantastic. Worth noting as well, there isn't something that you normally find in endurance style racing like a balance of performance. It doesn't change between race to race. This is a pure on fight. It relies on driver skill in terms of this event. So they just have that balance of performance. It doesn't get any changes at all. They rely on pure skill, and now that's the changing of the guard there. Mikhail in second, going past first place, and now realizes, oh, I've got 2/10 that I need to find, as the man jumps by Shalinu to go to 5th place as we go on board from the driver's eye.
Yeah, now making his way back to the Dunlop Hairpin, pretty much the lowest point of the circuit for the GP layout. And you can see that very well as you look up that monstrous hill, the Schumacher S. And despite that elevation and despite the sort of off-camber nature, you don't see them really just slowing down at all. You saw him just lift off the throttle barely there. And now into the Ravenel bend, I think he's hoping that he will catch that Aston Martin on the back straight. Maybe get a little bit of slipstream, but hopefully not in the corners. And he gets out of the way like an absolutely perfect example, if you would ask me. And yeah, now down the Advan Arch, and for his hopefully next attempt to snitch pole position away from Kyokudo.
But this lap is not good. It's already 1.4 seconds adrift in terms of time. So it's going to dive down into the pits. One last set of tyres and go for it again. Late call from Windy Boy to dive down into the pits with the anime-inspired car there, of course, on the side. It looked like it was a little bit from the Lost Worlds, if anyone has heard the song Bad Apple through the course of time in the annals of animation. That, I think, is where the reference comes from, but I can be corrected if I am very much wrong. But this is Ivan, currently in 4th position right now, 1.2 seconds off of the pace, and this has been a story of Ivan's season so far in 2020. Has been knocking on the door of those top 3, has shown some really good pace, but has just not been able to unlock that extra level, which I think those top 3 drivers certainly have. We've seen it on occasion in a couple of events, especially Brands Hatch came to mind with Ivan's pace, but Ivan is someone who needs to just think about, okay, what's the part of the game where I'm losing time compared to my rivals, and how do you find it? 1.5 minutes to go, will not be able to get out and around the track for one more lap. So Ivan is all but done on those super soft tyres. Will not find more demand. They're having to get out of the way then down at the bottom, but a minute and a bit to go right now as the Vision Gran Turismo FT1 of Shalinu now finds its way towards the Dunlop Hairpin.
Yeah, and he also has another few places that he could gain. Only 700ths pretty much of a second to Daman, who's been very strong ever since his showing at Laguna Seca. And Cellino, of course, with his FT1, with a very nice, I think, little play on the old West McLaren livery. F1, very, very nice looking car. I think he's going to be very desperate to get that last bit of time. Of course, these minuscule gaps, you can gain them quickly. But if you're on the limit for yourself and, getting the last bit of feel down, it can be really something that you bite your teeth out on.
It's showdown time. 30 seconds remaining on the clock and under. Just clips there. The marker board does Shalinu going through. Chris Pateri leaves the room, so that's not going to be ideal. He may miss the start if he's not back in incredibly quickly. And 1 second's worth of slowdown, going too aggressive over that chicane, which is the prime overtaking opportunity, or one of them around this place. That is going to be no improvement on that lap. Windy there in 7th position. Daman is being chased behind as well. Timer expires. Chris Pateri back in room. Will be able to take part then in the race here and try and get this one going. Likes of Black Sky searching for more time in 8th place as well. There is Daman in 5th position, heading through that chicane, looking to try and attack as much as possible in that Aston Martin Vantage V12, going through the right of the final corner, the Hyundai End Curve, looking for that final burst of speed over towards the start-finish line. No change 1, no change 2, no change 3 either. They will not get any times going. Windy dives down into the pits. That time was not good enough to find improvements. There is Kyokudo, one of the last drivers out on track who's searching for times, diamonding off the corner then, going through that hairpin and just struggling a little bit there, coming off of the exit of the corner, now through that Schumacher S, and of course, it was so very, very interesting to see Mick Schumacher do a fantastic job of driving, of course, Michael's F2004 at Mugello, and not only that, picking up his first Formula 2 win, which I think will go down as the Schumacher dynasty, some would say, in terms of racing careers, continues. But Kyokudo through Advan, and now looking at this, up the rise towards that chicane and hitting the brakes. How close do you want it here in terms of aggressive factor? There's one car who's off of the road right now. I think this is just consolidation at this stage from Kyokudo in the Lexus. Nobody behind to challenge. Is this going to be a stamp of authority? Pole position is all but secured right now, and that is a fantastic step to go forward. 153.7. There are drivers behind, though, who will be looking for timed improvements. There is Mikal, there is Shalinu, both of whom cannot find that improvement. Kyokudo has just put nearly half a second on everybody else in the field over that qualifying. He knows how to just extract aspects, say, like so many drivers have not been capable of doing when it has come to qualifying. Qualifying, of course, over to a close. Kyokudo from Mikal, and then Windy Boy is starting from 3rd position on the grid. Nicholas, you can't argue with Kyokudo's pace. He is the fastest over the course of a single lap. But, of course, the draft, the toe, not necessarily a drafting track here at the Nurburgring, but 0.4 of a second a lap can be closed with 2 very, very good runs in the 3rd and 1st sectors.
That is definitely true, and especially since we have such very nice and long straights here. And I would say we have more than just a fair share of very nice braking zones, of course, as well, as we now make our way to start these 90 minutes here. Kyokudo, of course, with a very dominant qualifying once again, putting that bit of extra pressure on them. It's just about to start, and here we go, 90 minutes. And yeah, he seems to be quite nicely still in the lead, but of course, we have a long straight, a very, very long straight, with Mikal already closing 0.2, just as you said. They can close these gaps so very quickly.
What's key about that start is compared to other circuits, there is a very, very small gap on the rolling start. Normally you get about a second to a second and a half. That was a 7/10 gap. Mikhail with a wiggle then, going through the arena at turn 2. Looking now towards 3, and what can Windy Boy do to try and find those places? No real changes then off of the start then, as they now start to attack. Big wiggle from Deman in 5th position in the Aston Martin, looking to attack Ivan for 4th in the Lexus right now, going down the hill. They come along. Those differences are always going to be key when you're dealing with a corner like that right, which is so easily taken for granted. But as they go and attack, it's all nice and clean from the start, as we love to see here with World Pro Racing.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be that we have had our fair share of start collisions, of course, this year. This is now the delayed one there, as Sasha completely misjudges his braking point and slams into the back of Mr. Colin. And I think that will be something that our FIA stewards will have a look at later.
Of course, that team that is put together, Adrian Fagaio and George Muscat. Adrian Fagaio, the chief race director, and George Muscat, the steward, here today. They will be having their eyes peeled on any incidents that are happening. There is Windy Boy's Lexus right now, trying to chase down Mikhail in that BMW M6 as they go up the hill, looking for the braking zone. It's around the 100-meter board marker as they funnel through the left and then the right. And then, of course, that final right props up on the horizon and already focuses on what is starting to pull away from the driver who is leading this event in the form of Kyokudo. Hard to the pit wall. They all go along, and Mikhail says, I'm not going to get any advantage by being in the draft 1.5 seconds back off of the race lead. I'm just going to take the natural racing line, and if anybody gets close enough, then that is that. We will deal with it as and when it happens. And that start, and of course that second lap, very, very reminiscent of Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You don't often see it at tracks, but drivers trying to hard defend the inside because of the fact of how valuable it seems the draft is today.
Yeah, I think the draft will definitely be a big tactical element in this race today, especially since we have, as the aforementioned, long straights. Of course, not just the front straight and the run from the Bilstein Bend down to Wedel through the Abbahnbogen, but we also have these longer straights here from turn 7 to the Dunlop Kere. You can get plenty of slipstream down here, and if you want to play it that way, you can just back off a little bit more, because you also have a downhill run, even more momentum to just gain when you're just accelerating behind someone, and even more momentum to take out to save some more fuel. And in this endurance race, it will definitely be something that might be interesting for people. Maybe it will be the big merger that they can save a single pit stop here.
Well, this is something that's very, very interesting, as Deman is under pressure from Shalinu in the Vision Gran Turismo Toyota here as they make that progress through the next right and starting to attack now the next stages of this lap. And now here comes a prime opportunity against that V12 Vantage, as it is Japan versus United Kingdom in terms of manufacturer as they go up the hill onto the brake. Shalinu's looking late, but it was just that a look, didn't have any commitment to the corner, had to back out of it there to avoid an incident, and that's some very good heads-up driving. But what is key is how we have seen drivers look at super softs or softs. No real look at the medium compound tyre here so far, and I think those who are looking to try and save a stop might be looking at a tyre that's very durable, and one which of course gives them that better opportunity to go out there, lift and coast, save some fuel.
Yeah, that will definitely be the case. I think for the start of the race, everyone is just trying to get the maximum possibilities out of their start. And with a soft tire, of course, you may have to pit a bit early, but I think you really want the maximum possible grip to just keep up with the front runners at the moment. Kyokudo, of course, he's really in his element once again, 2 seconds ahead of the others at the moment. And of course, it doesn't help. Mikhail constantly has to keep one eye in the rear mirror because Windy is quite right behind him. Still, like, he gained half a second, sorry, there, onto Windy in the last 2 laps. But still, Windy is still there, and we can already tell from experience how quickly these things can change with a single mistake, to which none of these drivers is impervious.
Exactly. They would have put in all of the time, all of the hours, though, to make sure that they have the best possible vehicle available to them to make sure that they have the best possible lap times available to them, and they have that level of consistency factor around this place. Here is Black Sky, though, in 8th place, looking to challenge Ilwindi in 7th. That's a little bit of contrasting lines. A slightly missed apex there from Ilwindi, though, is going to open up the opportunity here in the battle of the Porsches right now as they rise up the hill, looking for the next overtaking opportunity out on track, and Black Sky is not in a position to capitalize, almost as if you need another 50 meters before that chicane really does prop up into view. It's such an easy thing to think that you've got more time than you have, and that will be something worth keeping in mind. There is Sasha in 9th position at the moment, having a comfortable run of things, but that battle for 8 looked like it could have been going for a move. There's Kenneth in 10th position. Here comes Black Sky, though, looking for the inside, and this is why it's so very easy to defend it, because Windy's going to have to take the big wide line here and took lots of track out of it, but able to gather up the pace early. Black Sky gets very squirrely through the corner, has to double take through it and lose the place out, which so very difficult it was to try and take. So a Windy survives, and that's why turn 1 here at the Nurburgring is so difficult with a huge slide, because you can take the outside line and hold it.
That is the very nice nature of a lot of these corners here. You can take so many different lines. You can see here, Kyokodo, he's taking a very late apex, for example, and Windy is copying that from him immediately there. You can have so many different runs. We saw it so many times before as well in the Hyundai End Curve, the last corner of the circuit. You can go for a bit of a wider entry or for a bit of a narrower entry. It's always up to you how you want to carry the momentum with these cars through the entire circuit. And it's really interesting how the different concepts of the cars, so for example a front engine car or a rear engine car or a mid-engine car, of course, how they can take these corners so differently.
Exactly, and it's all about that dynamic that we see time and time again. The battle for 5th and 6th still on here on screen. Now, this is something that a lot of people who understand sprint racing and formula racing and probably the most common styles of racing out there will go, well, why aren't they making overtakes? Why aren't we seeing those battles happen? And why are we not seeing those moves out there on track? And the very simple fact of the matter is endurance racing is a different style of battling. You normally get to see overtakes happen by being patient, by waiting, by trying to play strategy, by trying to force the driver in front to maybe pit a bit earlier or run into a mistake. You have all the time available to you. Remember, we're only looking at nearly 10 minutes here into this 90-minute race, and that would be 1/9 distance scored and categorized as complete here in this one. So at the moment, Shalinu doesn't really have to do anything of note. The only worry will be, well, how much time am I losing behind a man who runs wide through turn 3, and that compromises maybe Shalinu's run through turn 4, to someone like Ivan, who's pulled out another 6/10 in the Mercedes-Benz arena.
I think this is also where the tire wear will start really coming into effect now. We saw earlier that Mikael has now pulled a 2-second gap on Windy, and I think that potentially he's just, you know, a bit better in control of the tire wear in that BMW right now than Windy trying to keep up with him in his Lexus. And it's extending up to 2.5 seconds now, while Mikael, though, he can still keep up with Kyokudo, and that is really difficult to tell now. I don't know what compound they started on and what compound they're on right now, because it's starting to sort of look like Windy might be on a super soft tire, so which would explain quite easily how he's losing so much pace now, because he was able to keep that gap for the first couple laps, but suddenly there came that drop-off, which would quite coincide with the drop-off window of the super softs.
We see that drop-off becomes vital here. You get a few good laps underneath the belt, and if you can't get the consistency value going, then you could be in a little bit of trouble in this race. The man going through as well here, this final chicane, and Shalini with a good run then. Half defended there into the corner. In fact, it's a full defense from the man there, taking the middle of the road line, which of course makes life difficult. Shalini sliding off the exit in the VGT Toyota, and this is a really good run to try and get this position up into 5th place. Is this going to be the chance that we see now down on the inside? The man is covering it off then with the early move to the right-hand side as they go through. Shalinu again gets a good run off the exits of these corners. but just doesn't have the angle to really nose one to the inside. We go on board right now with that VGT Toyota, and going through these corners, you can see there's a little bit of wash going through that corner, a little bit of that dirty air effect. You can see it with the wiggle. You can't naturally stay behind a car that's got a spoiler as large as that on the back, because you have to try and deal with the dirty air effects and the turbulences that you have out here on this circuit. So you have to be creative a little bit in terms of how you get close. And once you do, you have to make the move swift and efficient, which has been neither so far from Shalinu.
Yeah, but of course, you have to also take into account the impeded visibility, because of course, when you have a car as large as the Aston V12 Vantage GT3 in front of you, car that's been, sadly retired already in real life, it's quite a bit of car that is just sitting in front of you. And when you're 3/10 behind someone else, just sitting there, you're trying to see the apex, you're trying to do, of course, alternating line, because he's really pushing it on the limit, isn't he? You're always trying to see past your opponent. It's a human instinct pretty much when you're driving. So for Shalinu, he's pretty much in a horrible position right now, because he has to see past that 2-story house of an Aston Martin.
He certainly does. Sasha, though, is under pressure, or was, because exit stage right. Why don't we hear for Kenneth, who tries to bring back his Aston Martin back into play, and that was very, very awkward in terms of that run. There is Mr. Colin in 11th position in this race, 48 seconds off of the race lead at the moment. There is your race leader, Kyoto, who is out in front by the tune of 2.6 seconds, a 1:55.6, matched on that last lap by Windy, who finds himself in 3rd position overall. That's Windy Boy at this stage, and now it's all about settling into the grind. And of course, that endurance grind is effectively getting yourself into a tunnel vision. I'm really worried now about how Shalinu is driving that VGT Toyota, because if the backs are stepping out after 13 minutes, as we catch this on the replay here for you, ladies and gentlemen, then what is that saying about how those rear tyres are able to hold up in the VGT Toyota?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that he's, it's saying that he's ready for Hollywood as a stunt driver with those drifts. Well, perhaps, they built the car for the wrong group with this, with a Group 3 car. It could very well be used in JDM, as it seems. But either way, yeah, it definitely seems like Shalinu has been pushing a bit too hard on those rear tires. And you can see it in his times. He's dropping down more and more. He can carry less and less momentum through corners. And even in these high-speed corners, when the tire grip is gone, you really can't do anything. And Daman, now completely freed of the shackles of looking into the rear mirror while driving, he can just start pushing and maybe focus a little bit more on Mikael in front of him. Meanwhile, Black Star, who's a couple positions just behind that, and Windy, our second Windy in the Pink Pig Porsche, I think they're going to be looking ahead, quite interested, because, of course, Shalinu 6 seconds ahead. How long can it stay that way with rear tires like those?
And you actually make a point which is a lot closer to the truth than maybe you would have first thought, Nicholas, because, of course, those who don't understand the Japanese area of racing and what goes on there, they have a very, very successful GT formula. They've got the GT 300 and the GT 500 spec runs for Super GT, which, of course, Jenson Button ran just a couple of seasons ago. So you have a very, very diverse and often underreported when it comes to, firstly, mainland Europe and the United States, scene of racing in Japan. On top of that, the Japanese drifting community is legendary, and many a person knows about the mountain route, say, of Akina and so many other places that have come into play over the course of many a run that has gone up and down various mountains there. But on top of that, you've got those famous drifting tracks like Ibisu, which have done so many wonders to understanding how important drifting can actually be as a community. There is your battle at the front of the field, then up at 3 seconds at one point, down to just 2.8, and Windy Boy now a full almost 6 seconds back here of Mikael, and struggling now all of a sudden in that Lexus to really open up opportunities. And actually, look at who's just behind Windy and hasn't gone away in terms of this race. It's Ivan, and we've been quiet about Ivan over the course of the opening 15 minutes of this race so far here, Nicholas. But what has been key is that the driver in 4th place has just been getting on with the race. Nothing to worry about, and that is an early stop getting off of the super soft tyres from Kyokudo after just 15 minutes. And what's going to be key, look who's following in right now. Windy, who was on the soft tyre, that's a shock. And Ivan, who was also on the soft tyre, coming in as well. So now, what's key, Kyokudo's just gone onto the soft compound tyre, but it's all about tyre change only in terms of this one. A bit of fuel going in as well and trying to get back out and away. What was key there in terms of that stint from Kyokudo was that it seemed like next to no fuel went in the car.
First of all that, but that was an absolute shocker that he was able to make the super softs last longer than Windy was able to make the softs last. So that's definitely going to be... I could imagine that could be quite a bit of panic for some of the drivers, just seeing him switch off the super softs now. And yeah, what I think this pit stop was most importantly for, pretty much for us, is to know pretty much how much fuel they started with and how much they have left. Because after 15 minutes, they have pretty much 40% of fuel left. We can pretty much see how long they will stay out then regularly, and you know, how long people will try to do pit stops.
That's going to be key, because that puts this race here, if my maths is correct, at a 3-stop event here today. So drivers are going to be having to come into the pits, work out where they are in terms of their strategy, and get out going again. That was a really interesting stop from Kyokudo, and you can see that from the way that he's coming, got the tyres fueling out and away again, was only finding himself a full 6 seconds back off of Mikhail. Such is the way that the pits are calculated here at this fantastic Nurburgring track on Gran Turismo Sport. You really do not lose much time when it comes to the lane. For example, Windy's only 14 seconds back of Mikhail, so you can have a longer stop around here, but effectively you can gain time. 1 lap later, Mikhail decides it's time to dive down in to the pits with 35% of the tank remaining there in the M6, and that will be something worth keeping in mind. Their gears, fuel, how much fuel is going to be going into that car when it gets out and away. Another set of soft tyres and back out and away again, and that's something worth keeping in mind. Only puts in 33% of fuel, so that's a third of a tank back in the car for Mikhail, who comes out, get this, right with Windy, who used the fresh tyres to advantage.
Yeah, definitely the undercut seems to have worked for him, and I think that's going to be very interesting to see over the rest of the race how people will attempt this, because we saw how much of a lead he had over Windy. That was 5 seconds, and if it's that much that you gain just by pitting 1 lap earlier, for example, I shudder to think about the strategic plays that people will think up now, while they are of course still racing for position here.
They're racing for position. They are hoping that they get exactly what they want as these two battle it out for 2nd and 3rd place overall. There is the man in the Aston Martin in 4th position right now, and a 1:57.9 that last time by would indicate that the tyres are maybe starting to just fall away a little bit potentially. Ivan behind in 5th place has come down in, has made a stop, and is back out and away again. In terms of the racing action that we have, this is going to be an interesting scenario that we see. And what has been another thing to keep in mind in terms of drivers taking fuel, taking tyres, is that if they are going to take fuel and they're not going to take an entire tank to go back up to full and maybe deal with those worries, then how much fuel do you put in? And the natural reaction response to how much fuel do you put in when it comes to your stint is, well, Nicholas, you might as well put in as much fuel to cover the tyre change.
That is definitely the case, and I think it's always the difficulty, though, to actually get the fuel properly sorted there. Because, of course, other people drive with different fuel maps, and we saw that Mikhail had only 35% left with, you know, pretty much 9 laps driven, 1 lap more than the others. And at that point, I think, you know, you have to really start getting into the calculations how much percent of fuel they use. And I think we just saw someone go off at the Dunlop curve down there.
Looked like Kenneth, and that's going to put the battle at the back into perspective here with Mr. Colin wanting to find a way through the lefts and rights and up the hill. We'd also had Mikael and Windy very, very briefly change positions on screen. That wasn't a timing glitch or anything you saw on the left-hand side. That was very much a battle for position, which ended out with Mikael top of that. Windy dropping back a little bit then after all of that which went on. But Kenneth here is starting to lose out, and there is the place gone to Mr. Colin. So Kenneth, who has been, I would say adventurous is the right word, started to drop back. But Mr. Colin not having any of it then as they go into the fantastic left-right chicane. And Mr. Colin now just has to focus on his own race. 8 seconds to Sasha, and 9th, 10th, 11th will be something worth keeping in mind the longer this race goes on.
Yeah, I think this is going to be very interesting to see with everyone playing this out, because, of course, Windy can sort of try to keep this rhythm up and, try to just constantly stay with Mikael ahead. But at the same time, Ivan, Daman, and all the guys behind, they're going to play a different strategic game. Of course, right now, Ivan is concerned about his position here. But if Ivan can go a bit longer, for example, I mean, he went into the same pit, in the same lap as Windy. But if he just tries to go a little bit longer, and for the last stop, for example, he has to refuel, then accordingly 10-20% less fuel. That's quite a few seconds that you can gain from that.
2 takes trying to put the power down in the Aston Martin, and we catch it on replay through the Hyundai End curve. And this is the key. Power, not there. Power, still not there. You always wait and wait and wait when it comes to these sorts of vehicles. I remember Jackie Stewart once saying on Top Gear that you have to wait until you can fully put the power down through the middle of a corner, and James May ending up getting an earful of full power from the legendary Scotsman and the 3-time Formula 1 world champion. So that's what I think drivers will have to be careful about. How much can I push on the wall of the tyre through a corner? Sideways is nice, but as we all know, and we've talked about a little bit earlier on here in this broadcast, Nicholas, it's never the quickest.
Definitely never the quickest, especially not in a longer point of view. Sometimes maybe it can give you a bit of a time gain, especially when you're in the rain, for example. Sometimes you can have a bit more play with the loose surface of the track. But especially with accelerated tire wear, I don't think it's really what you should aim for. It may earn you style points, but of course the lost time and the long-term lost time may lose you actual points in the championship.
And there's something else that hasn't really been talked about with that tyre wear acceleration, and that is if you do make a mistake and slide or spin or something like that, you're not doing a slide or a spin normally. You're doing effectively 5 spins on that tyre, or 5 slides on that tyre effectively to what would normally be done, which is meaning that you're doing 5 times the amount of damage than normal, and therefore you got 5 times the amount of things to worry about.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And especially, I mean, in these cars you don't have to worry about it that much because they have ABS and traction control. Everyone runs traction control as low as possible, of course, to have the best amount of speed out of the corner, as we see Kenneth with a 0.5 second slowdown penalty, trying to keep up with Mr. Colin. Really isn't going his way here after he had this little, unofficial class trip in the gravel trap at the Dunlop curve. But, I think he's trying to just get back into the rhythm and then continue. But going back to what I was saying earlier, everyone of course runs traction control as low as possible here. But ABS, there's no real downsides to running a high ABS here, and that is basically just going to keep away potential lockups from you, potential instabilities, potential things hampering your turn in, and of course potential things completely wearing your front tires, because oversteer is bad, but I think understeer in this circuit here with so many high-speed corners like the Schumacher S, for example, is a lot worse.
Totally agree, and that's where you start to find where drivers are better at looking after their tyres. They minimize the lateral sliding that comes along from a vehicle and can just quietly put the car through a corner without really damaging all of the chains of the tyre, of course, and the rubber that would be put down onto the circuit. So we'll keep that in mind as drivers go through, and we are almost at the 1/3 stage here in this race. We have gone through 25 minutes worth of the 90 minutes that we have available. Kyoto out in front by 8.4 seconds at the moment over the driver, almost rising into the distance and trying to close down the gap in Mikhail. And this is going to be an interesting little battle that we see from those drivers, those two, at this point in time, because it's all about gaining an advantage any which way you can. They were close together at 2 seconds. 6 seconds has been found in the opening stop, and now DeMann decides to dive down into the pits with 3% of the tank remaining, and that for a one stop or a first stop on the soft compound from DeMann is really something quite cool. And now you start wondering here, okay, is this the alternative strategy coming into play?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting take, of course. A lot of people were pitting earlier to pretty much just accommodate the tires, but he's going more the traditional way to accommodate his fuel usage. He really wants to wear down maximum of the fuel, but I think in his situation that hasn't quite worked for him because he has quite lost some time.
He has. He's now down to 8th place behind both Ilwindi and Black Sky. They have changed places over the course of the pit stop cycle and going back out on track. So Ilwindi has 1.7 seconds of penalty to serve. And you wonder, well, firstly, A, how do you accrue that penalty? And B, how you serve it? You accrue that penalty by cutting the track or running into another driver too heavily. Things which have been effectively classified as a safety rating system, which is effectively the new rage of sim racing ever since it was implemented first by iRacing, as there goes Black Sky a little bit wide, and this allows Ilwindi to take the outside line to try and attack and go around the outside to get the place, and thankfully backing out there goes Black Sky, so Ilwindi does jump up into 6th. But a penalty system, a driver's rating of safety rating has been now all the rage, and almost every single simulator wants a form of that in some way, shape or form. But then if you have to slow it, you'll see this ghosting effect into a couple of corners and straights from Ilwindi. If you go slow enough, you can just incrementally slow that time down, bring that gap down, and then effectively your penalty will be dropped off so long as you don't run into even more. DeMann's got fresh rubber, by the way, and will be wanting to get by both of these Porsches quickly as they battle out on track. Black Sky looking here, looking there, went to the right-hand mirror, to the left-hand mirror, trying to be a nuisance and not finding any mistakes.
Yeah, Black Sky, I think losing that position really didn't work in his favor here. Sometimes it's a bit more favorable when you can be the one pushing, but I think he just lost traction coming out of the Ford curve, and that really didn't help his chances there. But yeah, Ilwindi still has this 1.7 second penalty. Of course it will go down after some time, but of course you can see him sticking it down the inside there. Not quite alongside, but still able to look down the inside. Of course, you want to get past that car ahead, not just because of the typical, very familiar motorway feeling of this car in front of me is so slow, I have to overtake him, but also, if that car in front of you is really a lot slower, you have to overtake him, otherwise you will lose more and more and more time in the long run. And that seems to be the case right now, with him being stuck right behind Ilwindi. And then DeMann in his Aston Martin, right out of the pit lane a few laps ago, right on his back.
Well, Black Sky's searching here for the place and trying every which way in the black and green vehicle right now, trying to get on down the inside. Not quite there at the moment. That black and green Porsche trying to get away through on the pink Porsche just in front, and there, of course, in the red and white behind is DeMann, and there is the 1.7 seconds. Now, there's something quite crucial about those 1.7 seconds as well when it comes to this event and how Gran Turismo licenses its penalty points and its drive-throughs and all of the slowdowns that are available. What's key is that 1.7 seconds, where other simulators, say, would give you a time frame to serve that of, say, 40 seconds or so. This, for Gran Turismo Sport, you have till the end of the race, and here comes a move potentially for that 8th position. That's not finding it because it's all a look down the inside. How aggressive over the curb do you want to be from Black Sky as you go on through. That is a Schrodinger's overtake scenario. Best way to defend his attack, and that is very, very lucky between the pair of them, because it looked like for all the world that Black Sky just tried to send one for place and just did not find it. Going to get that one done, and now Ilwindi, look at the penalty points he's accrued from that. Another half a second, puts it up at 2.2, and there's Shalini just in front of him actually, and I want to point that out as well as we look at Windy in third. Shalini's also got 2.5 seconds worth of penalty to try and get down.
Yeah, and that's a lot of stress, of course, to wear down. Of course, when you don't serve all of your penalty, at the end it gets added to your race time. For an endurance race where it usually ends with a few laps between some cars, it's not that stressful. But of course, we here have a 90-minute, now 60 minutes left race. And of course, that's going to be nagging at you there. That is Kenneth there, going quite slowly and not quite as planned, I suppose. Mr. Colin is taking a detour as well.
Ooh. Tyres in the gravel is never useful at the Schumacher S, and that is the awkward how do I get it going again, and that is not the best rejoin in the world from Mr. Colin. He does not like the rears, he's still not liking the rears, and there he goes again, and into the barriers, then at the big right-hander, in comes Windy, in comes Kyokudo, both at the same time, to go and get a pit stop. Out and away is Kyokudo already. That shows you the difference maker right now. 7.5 seconds behind Mikal, so that would be a more traditional length stop from Kyokudo. He was that far behind last time when he came down into the pits, and Windy is out and away as well here at this stage. So 2 stops in 30 minutes. That would be 4 stops in 60 minutes. So this is looking like, if they're going to be attacking the way they do right now, it's a 5-stop race that these drivers are trying to get themselves together with.
It definitely seems that way. Usually it is, you know, all the big shouting of saving a pit stop. But in GT Sport, with the accelerated tire wear and the accelerated fuel flow, of course, I think the faster strategy here is not to refuel completely, not to wear it completely down, but to just go for a bit longer stint at the start, get some of that fuel out, so you have to refuel as little as possible in the next couple things, that you just stay around half fuel tank, but just orient yourself from your tires, because that apparently seems to be the fastest strategy right now.
We've also seen both Ilwindi and Black Sky dive down into the pits. Ilwindi out ahead of Black Sky then, as they both made their stop, which does release the man to go out there and set some times. But ultimately, this is about who can save a pit stop here and who can save a pit stop there, with tyres which will be starting to hurt a little bit on that Aston Martin, and will be a very, very interesting battle point to see if a pit stop can be saved out here on track. Currently 54 seconds off the lead, but in comes the race leader, Mikal, who had 1 lap to lead, as was last time, even stinted once again here on lap 17 of the event. A new set of tyres, and they could see from the graphic ever so briefly, that did not look like a world of tyre wear. It only looked like maybe, say, 20%, 30% of the tyre they're being changed. Kyokudo back into the lead, and crucially, as we look here at the second position, there is Windy, and that is not much of a gap at all. It's 8 seconds, as it was then, from everyone having a very similar style of stop. But we saw only really 20% of the tyre being really taken off of them soft tyres as they went on through, which tells me that there is a very, very big drop-off in terms of how the tyre goes from being very good to not very good.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. You could see from Kyokudo, as soon as he came out of the pits, I think at the start of the lap, he was around, you know, as you said, 7 to 8.5 seconds behind Mikal. And at the end of the lap, he had gained 2 seconds on him. It definitely seems that new tires are, well, the biggest sensation here since cut bread. But it definitely seems the same way that some people are still trying to go for different strategies, and I don't know to which avail or how effective that strategy will be.
Well, everyone knows that they've got to play the strategy card, and they've got to play it well. Kyokudo now out to a 9.8 second margin here in terms of this race. Mikal there in second position in the BMW, trying to chase down 7 seconds back of that is Windy in third place. Ivan is in 4th position right now, 17 seconds off of Windy at this stage in the Lexus, trying to push through. It's the 3rd Lexus in the pack, a full 9 seconds clear of Shalinu in 5th place and Daman in 6th overall right now here. This is 7th place at Windy, still 1.5 seconds worth of penalty to serve in the battle of the Porsches right now as they go on through. A nice Japan helmet there from Windy, trying to chase down as much as possible, and that's going to be worth keeping in mind as Black Sky just behind is wanting to get close and have a battle, and this is the closest battle that we have out here on circuit at the moment, and it seems that the two Porsche drivers are very evenly matched today.
Definitely seems that way, which is always nice to see. Of course, we like to see pure pace and someone absolutely pumping out lap records or something in that regard, but the thing why we watch racing, of course, is the battles. Some battles, of course, get carried out over strategy, but this right here is on track. And it really is interesting to see here as well, even though they have the same car and same setup, same BOP, they choose some different lines here and there, and it's really different, it's interesting to see the different effects of those lines that they have. You can see here very clearly into the Hyundai End curve how Black Sky is taking a lot wider entry, but now look at the momentum he has gained throughout the entire corner, now able to gain down even more, almost 2/10, and now on the brakes, is he able to make a close look? No, not quite still. Bit early on the brakes, I think, than Windy, but of course, he's breathing down his neck, and besides that 1.5 second penalty, I think that's going to cause a lot of stress to Windy.
It's causing a little bit of stress. It's a bit of pressure that is there. And of course, when people talk about pressure and trying to apply pressure onto other drivers, one thing that doesn't really get talked about in terms of how drivers negotiate the pressure that's there on them, trying to deal with the forces of the car and trying to understand, okay, where am I in the race? What am I doing with strategy? What am I doing with tyres? What am I doing in terms of my track position? Everything that is to do with pressure is a mental game. It's all internalized. The only person that can deal with pressure is you yourself. And in terms of putting the pressure on another driver, you're hoping that you can create a mental mistake against the driver in front. It often gets misattributed that a driver has forced an error or has made that pressure, as in comes from 9th position Sasha in the Lexus, sitting out and away again in the not too distant moment. But in terms of pressure, a lot of people haven't really looked at sim racing and looked at maybe trying to get psychologists involved, or maybe looking at that psychological way that sim racing is to be looked at. And that may be the next thing that we see from the professional side of sim racing, is that people start looking at the psychology of sim racing and getting into the right frame of mind, which many people can do at the moment. Say, when you look at the real world of racing, a lot of people have psychologists and nutritionists and all the rest of the things that make body and mind effectively a temple.
Yeah, I think we've seen this development start to take place in the last couple of years already, to be honest, because we saw more and more bigger teams, Red Bull, Williams, they all start to get more and more into esports, and especially with events like the ACO 24 Hours of Le Mans that we had, it gets more and more intense, in my opinion, on how much the performance pressure is there, on, how fit the driver has to be, because the fitter a driver actually is, of course, it's just a simulator, and people will always just put it down as, oh, it's just a video game. But still, the amount of forces that you sometimes have put on you through a direct drive wheel or through a steering wheel in general with hard force feedback, it's something that you actually have to have done to actually comprehend over an endurance race. And some of these guys, especially in endurance racing, they do 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour. I did a 5-hour stint once myself in an LRP1 car, and at the end, you barely can stand up. It doesn't matter if it's all the G-forces put on you, and of course, the thing is that you don't have G-forces here, so you have to concentrate all the more, which puts even more mental pressure on you. So I think there's quite a bit of psychology involved with sim racing already.
There certainly is, and say for someone who's getting back into the racing sphere, someone like, say, myself, I found myself with a race earlier on this morning. I had 2 drive-through penalties. I stopped 4 times in a 28-lap race, and I somehow still finished only 1 position down from where I started. So in terms of how you deal with that pressure, I'm someone who crumbles like a leaf when it comes to, say, racing and driving out there on track. So I'm definitely not going to be caliber material, but these drivers, they are certainly searching to try and be caliber material because of that big prize of representing the nation of Malta in, of course, the Nations Games and the FIA's Nations Games in the sim racing category. It's so cool to see where sim racing has come from. Say from where we were maybe 2 years ago, even a year ago, to where we are now. I think that sim racing has been something that has taken off, that has been probably the only form of game out there in the world, in terms of the world of sports, when the global event hit, so to speak, and really found itself with a platform to be most transferable and the easiest to lean into to continue to develop a scene. I think that when you see where sim races come from, as Windy picks up 1 second of slowdown penalty, which will not be very ideal for that in terms of where we're going, I think sim racing has been the one that has capitalized the greatest in terms of all of the sporting genres in terms of the gaming sphere.
I think overall sim racing can be described as the e-sport to the real sport that is actually the closest to the real sport. Because I think overall you see people using a simulator, you see people using different rigs. Of course, hardware is all different. And of course, you can't compare the real thing with the simulator all the time. But I think it would mean a lot more when, you know, with, of course, like everyone has the same experience or well, preparation. But I think it's a lot more to brag about when you say you beat an F1 driver in a simulator than saying, for example, you beat a football player, a professional football player at FIFA. Simply because sim racing in the pure, like in the base element, is so much closer than real racing than pretty much all other esports.
And that's something worth keeping in mind. Of course, there are a number of esports out there in terms of the overall scene. I know we're on the esports television network as well, which means that it's a chance to talk American football, which is back, of course, on the fantastic networks that are there, like Fox and NBC and all of those who are looking to try and cover some amazing sport. And that's the sort of thing where you start to see people looking to try and go to the next level and trying to find maybe ways to be a little bit more transferable in terms of their skills. Black Sky comes into the pits here as we got ourselves almost towards the halfway stage in this one, but those transferable skills, which sim racing just has that ability to do. How many drivers have we talked about now that have made that transfer from real racing to sim racing, and vice versa, from sim racing to real racing? You can talk every day and night. That's actually a medium tire going on Black Sky at the moment, so that's a really interesting call and a change of strategy. But that change, say like James Baldwin, Igor Fraga, you can keep going down the list of names that have gone on again and again and again that use sim racing as that tool or have used it as that development to move forward. William Byron, another one. Every single driver jumping up to that next stage. How important has sim racing been to really capturing the minds and imaginations of the next generation of sim racing talent?
I think especially in the last couple months, it may sound a bit morbid, but overall the entire quarantine situation is the best thing that could have possibly happened to esports and sim racing in general, simply because bigger amassing, you know, like spectator amassing tournaments of sports, of racing and all that, they had to be cancelled for everyone's safety, which is just the normal sensible thing to do overall, to you know, hinder the outbreak, to keep all of this in check. But sim racing has this enormous advantage that you can just do it from home. And more drivers you saw just get more and more simulators. Simulators and sim racing hardware was on complete sellout prices. They were completely getting higher in prices because the demand was so high. And I think, especially with the field now having broadened so much and so many more drivers from real side and of course also just completely new sim drivers having come into this, I think it's pretty much the golden age of sim racing right now.
It certainly is, and it's about getting your voice heard out. As Shalini has come out of the pits then, remaining on the soft compound tyre and in 6th position overall here in this event. You are watching, of course, the HyperX Endurance Series here live from the fantastic Nurburgring circuit in Germany, and this is your leader at the moment, Kyokudo Sentai here, who is out and away by 10.5 seconds after a very, very good and quick opening stop, which has given a little bit more room to gain a little bit of time here and a little bit of time there. You can go there to World Pro Racing, register if you want to join in for events, weekly casual races, special events on many a different platform, be it PS4, be it PC, be it many different platforms of racing that is available out there. We are just over the halfway stage here in this event, so what I think would be a nice little thing to do is just step aside for one moment when it comes to World Pro Racing. You won't miss any of the action. We're going picture in picture here for this one right now, but Kyokudo with the lead at the moment at the halfway stage, 45 minutes left on the clock to decide the winner of the opening round of the season. This event is brought to you by World Pro Racing, the Malta Motorsport Federation, GMR Entertainment, WJ England & Son, Melita, Media Looks, Restream.io, Gaming Malta, VisitMalta.com, and TVM Sport. This stream is powered by Melita, using Melita Gigapower Internet. World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
It's just so dangerous. You're risking not only your life, but also my life.
Wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the HyperX Endurance Series, the opening round of 4 here from the Nurburgring. Kyoto Sentai has a lead of 9.4 seconds here with 36 minutes remaining on the clock here in this one. They race until they get to 0 and then they get across the line. So, what can Kyoto do to keep that gap? It's starting to negotiate a little bit of traffic out here on circuit. There is 10th place. Kenneth running a little bit wide. He's the last running car at the moment here in this one and has a really horrible right-hand corner. 2 laps down on your race leader as there is Black Sky just in front, about to be put a lap down after about an hour's worth of work here in this one. Kyoto out in front of Mikhail in second. It is Lexus, followed by BMW, followed by Lexus, followed by Lexus. But the thing that I noticed the most, Nicholas, just going through that period of break that we had when we were picture-in-picture, was position number 3 and Windy Boy. Because although there is 35 seconds worth of gap, there is 3.7 seconds of slowdown, which really does indicate that Windy is pushing a little bit too hard, trying to stay with the front 2.
Yeah, it seems that he's really trying to compensate at the moment for the gap in the middle of the race, which, well, quite honestly, it doesn't seem to be the way, and he seems to be pushing over the limit, not only the track limits, but also over the limits of the car, which, you know, it's something that we've seen before. In the Bathurst race, we had a similar situation where he cracked under pressure, had the spin, and it was very unfortunate for him. And it seems at the moment, well, we haven't seen a spin yet from him. It seems that at the moment he's just trying to push a bit too hard on the tires and loses quite a lot of time as a result.
It's very easy to pick up penalties if you're not being very careful about the way that you're driving around this place. Here at the Nurburgring, it's such a easy track to think about in your mind, but when you drive it in reality, all of the cambers and the elevation changes here, they really do make life difficult, especially that opening corner, turn number 1, as Ivan dives through it here in 4th position. You don't really understand how much you need to brake at that corner, especially when gravity goes against you at that section of road, which makes the braking all the more taxing on those brake discs at the front.
That's definitely the case, and well, we obviously see already, just from our TV cameras here, how much elevation there is, but it's really something, because pretty much the entire way from coming out of the Hyundai End curve, as I said, it's the highest point of this part of the circuit. So for the Grand Prix circuit, the Hyundai End point is pretty much, well, the apex of the hill. And then it just goes all the way down to the Dunlop curve, just absolutely bottom of the entire thing. And even though we have a bit of fluctuation here, the bit where it really goes down is here, coming up, as we see here, Daman and Sasha, turn 6, this left-hander, and then the right-hander, turn 7, the fourth curve. And now that final bit completely downhill into the fourth curve, the Dunlop curve, sorry. That is the biggest part of elevation drop. From this one out, it's pretty much always just a way further back up. The Bildstein Bend, the turn 12, which is the end of Sector 2, which we'll reach in just a few seconds if our camera stays with the man, that is close to being a higher point again, but it's not quite as high up as the Hyundai End curve. Now we go through the Ravenel Bend, sorry.
That's absolutely fine there, Nicholas. You're having a lot of fun with that as the car in 6th place gets by the car in 9th place to put a lap forward on the board. This lap, of course, has this fantastic rise up the hill, and this very, very famous angled camera, which sees all the way up towards this very chicane, which has been a sore point of contention in the earlier stages. The man finding out just in front when the two Porsches of Ilwindi and Black Sky decided they wanted to get a little bit personal with each other, I think is the right way to say it, going through that chicane. But ultimately, this is a place where many a incident can happen if you're not being maybe as alert as you think you can around this place, and these drivers will be all looking to try and make sure they have the best event possible. And these drivers as well at the front, you've got Kyokoto 10 seconds clear of Miguel right now, has managed to gather that gap back up. The question now becomes, how good was that first stop to allow Kyokoto to get into that position? I want to be very, very I am very interested to see what the fuel levels are going to be like, as in comes Black Sky from the medium compound tyres, effectively saying there are 2 stints left in Black Sky's race. To this one and the next one, of course, the final stops. They can see the small spikes coming out of the pits, then trying to get things going. And it's this small attention to detail which is so very much loved, and part of the vision that has been going on for many, many a year over, of course, with Polyphony Digital.
Yeah, it definitely is, and overall you have to give them a lot of credit for these very beautiful animations in the pit stops, of course, as well. And generally, Gran Turismo Sport, it's just such a very, very good looking game. You can always see so much with the cars going on. You can see how the dynamic behavior of them really changes, especially here, and like going into the corners, you can see how it's, you know, how it's bumping, like it's going over the bumps. There's the resistance of the suspension, and it's really nice to see that.
It certainly is. There is Windy here on screen, currently 25 seconds off of the race lead right now, 16 off of the back of Mikhail at this stage, and having a pretty solid run of things here. But in terms of the top 3, Windy would be hoping that it wasn't going to be 3rd place here today, but was more rather something a little bit easier, as we just saw one driver, I believe, almost taking to the lane, but I believe just has come out of the pits. I'm not quite sure who that was. It was down a little bit in the order. But Windy here, just struggling a little bit to stay with those top two. Leader comes in, 16% of the tank remaining on the soft compound. So we'll take a little look at this, see how close this gets in terms of the stop. And actually, Mikhail comes in at the same time for the first time. 3% difference in terms of the fuel tank. That tells me all I need to know about how Kyokudo has been managing the strategy. The fuel saving of the Lexus has been a little bit better than it has been for the BMW M6.
That definitely seems to be the case, but I think it's also even more of a testament of how much Kyokudo has been able to fuel save when you consider that Mikhail now changed his strategy from 1 lap later to 1 lap earlier, and despite that he only had 3% fuel more in the car.
And there you can see just behind, had a whole pit stop to work with over Windy there in what is third place. So ahead of the driver yet to come down in and make that 4th stop of the day here in 3rd position in the Lexus there, Windy, but Mikhail doing well. In comes Ivan, though, from 4th position. Now, that's an interesting stop. 56% of the tank is there for Ivan at this stage, so has been filling up the car to full almost every single time with the stop, and if anything's going that way in terms of correction, just fills up a little bit more to 71% of the tank, then this for Ivan is the quietest place in the world. You don't often get those sorts of gaps, 47 seconds behind 3rd place and then 30 seconds ahead of 5th. This is a lonely race for Ivan, who'll be feeling like this is a time trial.
Yeah, it would seem that way, but then again, it's not always a bad thing to, have a little bit of peace and quiet on track, instead of being in a pack of, 5-6 cars constantly battling. Windy, meanwhile, I just noticed he has now deviated from his normal strategy, because originally he pitted on the same lap as Kyokudo and has now changed to go 1 lap longer, and we can really see, since he was just a second behind Mikhail, that has really not gone well for him. The worn tires really do seem to just not work well at all.
Looking for an overcut potentially here is Windy, but a whole pit stop behind on the nearest rival is going to be a hurt, as down into the pits, leaving it as late as possible. 1% of the fuel tank remaining. That is fumes for one Mr. Windy, and now it's about getting those tyres on and away. A big 3 on the side, saying that's the position I'm in at the moment. I'd like to be a little bit higher up than position number 3 in this race. There's the cue from the Jackson. Off and away you go. The penalty down to 3.6 seconds, and that should be served a little bit later on here in this event. 19 seconds now the gap to 2nd position right now, and half a minute behind in terms of the race leader right now. In terms of events that will be going on in terms of the horizon with World Pro Racing, a lot to be looking forward to, Nicholas, in terms of what is coming up. Of course, we've got Thursday nights, which have become casual nights when it has come to not only Gran Turismo, but R Factor 2 as well. We're taking an hour around Kyalami in South Africa over in 2 days' time. And of course, round 2 of the championship here at at Monza is going to be coming to you 1 week from now. And then 2 days after that, we're heading, of course, to another Gran Turismo challenge over, of course, in that fantastic event that is coming up. So a lot to look forward to in terms of the racing sphere here in World Pro Racing. But the more things change, the more events that come up, the more things are seemingly staying the same. Sasha just taking that wide line, allowing Kyokudo the inside, and that is lap traffic getting out of the way. Then as Kyokudo goes on to start lap 35 of this event in terms of who has led the most laps. Kyokudo has about, I would say, 32 of those 34 laps led in terms of this race, and well, you could say that the other 2 belong to the driver behind in terms of Mikhail at this stage, and it's been that ever chopping and changing of the strategy of pits that have been preventing the Grand Slam so far today from Kyokudo, and of course that Grand Slam now very much out of reach and even tougher to get in an endurance event. Nicholas, though, how important has that Lexus been in terms of a car choice? It's the most populous in terms of vehicle today. We've got 4 Lexuses in the field. And what's crucial is that 3 of the top 4 have liked the Lexus.
I'm going to be honest, I think it's been pretty much the safe choice for this race, because we've seen a lot of nervous cars. We've seen Cellino really struggling with the rear tires at an earlier stage in the race. And as we see him here with this wonderful West McLaren-inspired Toyota FT1. Really, the Lexus, because of the long wheelbase and overall, despite it looks, it generates quite a lot of downforce. I think it's generally a quite good car. It's a stable car. It's what you really, really want through corners, like, for example, the Michael Schumacher S. Because when you get up on curbs, that's a very, very nervous car under braking there, as he just touches the dirt there on the outside. But yeah, when you go over high curbs in fast corners, like in the first left-hander of the Schumacher S, you really want a car that takes those curbs well. And that is the Lexus. The Lexus has a constant power band with that NA engine. It's just absolutely perfectly able to handle all the curbs here. As we even see Sasha down here with a little bit less pace, of course, and just generally a bit further down the order. He still seems to be getting along with this car quite well as he now heads into the pit lane for probably his second to last pit stop.
Yep, 23 minutes remaining on the clock. This would seem like it would be a stop from now to the end. If you fill the tank up fully, though, you can make it to the end from this point onwards. That could be key. I will apologise, ladies and gentlemen. It's not casual Thursdays, it's casual Wednesdays. Tune in tomorrow for Kyle Army and, of course, in a week's time for Formula 3s over at Hockenheim. But ultimately, this is Kyoto right now, 9.7 seconds at the front, and we keep on saying it, you've got to be aggressive early against Kyoto. That turn of pace, this has been a management race from start to finish from Kyoto, has been unable to pull out a gap further than 10 seconds due to Mikhail, but it's no good being able to keep a gap steady at a certain place. You have to be able to close down that gap. You have to be able to get something going. If you can't make that happen, you have to be aggressive early, not only in qualifying, but on lap 1, you have really got to be chasing. Something that's not as helpful, some would say, with the rolling road starts that we have here in Gran Turismo Sport. But if you can do anything to close down that gap and stay within a range, that's the one thing you have to do to chase down that driver in first.
Yeah, the rolling starts definitely put an emphasis on the qualifying and an added difficulty, I'd say, just generally for the start behavior, for your chances to attack for the front positions. Because there's about 0.8 to 1.5 seconds of gap depending on how you get out of the last corner and get released from the automated process. So I think you can gain quite a lot of time, as we saw Mikhail pretty much gain. I think it was something like 4 or 5 tenths on the front straight just from slipstream. But of course, it's quite difficult to make a move nevertheless, because you're still 4 tenths behind. And Kyoto was just able to build up completely again and again and again throughout this entire race.
And it's that building up that we have seen, which has been just that little stage too far at the moment. Anything can change, though, when it comes to this race. One small mistake here or there can make the difference. But there is Windy in 3rd position right now, having a pretty decent run of things here, as we've talked about earlier on here in this event. But ultimately, 31 seconds off the lead, 35 seconds back to Ivan in 4th position. It has been a little bit of a walk away in terms of this one, and looking to try and pull over the gaps and try and do as much as possible here. The more that this race goes on, it may just be that some few positions are just that bit too far to try and find. But there will be positives to be taken out of this race with 20 minutes to go. And one of the positives that I think a lot of drivers will be looking at is actually how few mistakes have been made in terms of overall driving. People have been driving well within their limits over the course of this event. We haven't seen too many drivers run into troubles, and we've seen it time and again here with this community that have gone out to race, is that they haven't really had any major blow-ups here or there. It's been close and clean racing, and that has meant that most drivers have been picking up a finish every single time. But on top of that, it's meant that true talent has really just worked out overall.
Yeah, definitely is one thing that is always, well, at this point, almost to be expected when you switch onto these races. There's basically no collisions whatsoever. Everyone stays very respectful, and generally, as a racing enthusiast, it's always something I look forward to because, well, all the time it's quite literally a clean race and something just to look forward to.
It's always something to look forward to, and we see this time and time again, and this on Tuesday night has been a pretty good run in terms of when we've been running this. And of course, for those catching on demand or who are looking at this maybe from a further point in the future, on the 15th of September and onwards, this has been a pretty cut and dry race at this point in time. But you start thinking about, okay, what really constitutes the best way to get around this fantastic circuit? A track full of elevation change, a track full of differences that you can find. And one of the keys that we have been talking about is those medium to high speed corners. It's almost a lap of two halves around this place. It's the descent down to the Dunlop curve, and there's a wiggle from Mikael, actually struggling a little bit with the tyres, which will be due to come off in the next 2 or 3 laps, you would feel, in this one. And then the rise back up the track, which has been the second half of the laps that we have seen. Is this maybe a case where you get a track which has that identity, feels very similar both ways, both down and up, but at the same time feels like a case of a lap of two halves?
It's definitely like that. I mean, the second half of the lap, well, pretty much easily, you can just cut the Nurburgring in half. Just, well, figuratively in half, not quite literally. But when you see from the last corner to the Dunlop Hairpin, it's basically a majority. Oh, that is a lot of penalty amassed there. The way from, the front straight to the Dunlop Hairpin, it's pretty much the way down. And then, even though there's a small peak in the middle of the way back up in the second half of the lap, there's still this very, obvious rise. And we see Windy here just take right here through the Vedal S and then up to the corner again. And it's still something very nice to see, because a lot of modern tracks can seem quite flat. And of course, a lot of people criticize that a lot of corners are just copy and paste. And at the Nürburgring, it really feels, like every single corner is unique in its own way.
I'm going to ask you a question here, Nicholas, and my question is, does Windy have a picnic blanket in the back? Because if he is going to slow down and serve that penalty, he might as well get out a couple of sandwiches and a drinks tray and invite everyone along in terms of trying to serve that penalty. And by the time that he's had all of his sandwiches and the drinks and all of that, he'll still probably have 3 seconds of penalty left.
Well, maybe that is the reason why he chose the Lexus in the end. For the possibility of a penalty, he can store quite a lot of utensils for a picnic in the back. The rear boot still opens, and of course, the Lexus RCF, pretty much a family supercar, one could say.
And you see, heading down the hill on the 38th revolution of this circuit, Windy just running this one as nice and neatly as possible. A lot of drivers falling into their own little bubbles at this stage, which you could say is social distancing, ladies and gentlemen, which is being implemented absolutely fantastically. I do want to have a little look, though, further down the field. Shalinu in 5th, the man in 6th at this stage. That's Ivan in 4th place. There is the man in 6th position, 16 seconds behind Shalinu, but crucially, through the use of the stops here today, has pulled out 31 seconds over Ilwindi and Black Sky, who are 7th and 8th place, and not forgetting our last place runner at the moment, 3 laps down and could soon to be 4 laps down at this stage. Kenneth is in 10th position right now, and looking at this event, this has been a tough slog for Kenneth right now. We do have a few drivers of differing variables of pace, but there's still nothing wrong with that, as that's a very, very big missed apex through turn number 1, and I believe that's called searching something that's not quite there.
Well, searching alternative racing lines. At that point, while missing the while trying to search the apex, he may have found Windy's picnic blanket. But yeah, we see Black Sky now heading into the pit lane. 10% of fuel left, and this will definitely be the last pit stop for him. Probably putting on another set of softs with his Falcon tires there. And yeah, just waiting to take on enough fuel, and there we go.
15 minutes exactly then remaining on the clock. Out and away goes Black Sky for one final stint here from 8th position in the number 99 Porsche right now. If you want to join in with World Pro Racing and get on with us, you can head over to worldproracing.com, of course, and there is so much available to you, as well as a couple of prizes from time to time if you find yourself over there wanting a little bit of sim gear. Speaking of sim gear and speaking of Aston Martin, have you heard about that $73,000 simulator that they put together?
Yes, I have, and I mean, instead I would rather buy a real car, but you know, the option is always there. It's a limited run, of course, and overall the hardware that's on it is not bad, but yeah, what can I say except this is quite a hefty price. I mean, I know about a German company, Acteracer, which does these full motion sims, and those things are quite a big chunkus to put into your living room. They're pretty much bigger than a queen-size bed, and those things cost $40,000. But that's with all the motion and even the PC included. And for a non-motion rig, that is quite a hefty price at $74,000.
Out of the pits then comes the man. 0.0 left on the penalty to serve, and Ilwindi is now down into the pits from 7th position in this race with 13.5 minutes left here in the fantastic pig design there, which of course is such a classic when it comes to endurance racing. 4/10 of penalty to serve, and very comfortably back out and away in the 7th position in this race, with not long remaining in terms of how this one goes from now until the end. Kyokudo Sentai due in for a stop, heading back up the hill towards the end. That gap has stayed around 9-10 seconds for the majority of this race, and it's not about how much sometimes you win a race when it comes to an endurance event, or any event actually at that point in time, but to manage a gap sometimes it's even more tougher than actually pulling away and having a runaway race victory, because Mikhail, to be fair, from 9-10 seconds back, has given Kyokudo a race the entire way from now to the end of this one. It's just been a case of Kyokudo doing exactly what's needed. Chilinu comes in from 5th place now here, Nicholas, in that Vision Gran Turismo Toyota.
Yeah, last stop for him, and I think he's going to put on softs again. Maybe even he's going to do it like Ilwindi just did, and put on super softs for the last bit, for a last bit of hurrah maybe. And, well, let's see what he's going to put on. I think that is another set of softs, if I saw it correctly. Mikhail now in the pits, one lap even earlier than Kyokudo. So maybe he's going to go for a quite little bit of undercut, because I think he could have had another lap with that amount of fuel in the car.
Undercuts and super softs, maybe. That might be a way to go forward here for Mikhail if you're going to throw any last gamble, any last throw of the dice off and away. And it is the soft compound tyre. Windy Boy into the pits then from 3rd position with nothing left in the tank. Had to come down in and make a stop on that lap, as the penalty is down to 6.9 seconds, so at least it's served. And I can't talk anime anymore because it's just a massive 3 on the side of the car, which makes me very, very disappointed, actually, at this point in time, from someone who is very, very loving of the Japanese culture. But Windy here is trying to make some progress, but here we go on the brakes and off and away again here in 3rd place. And not really much you can say apart from, well, there's 7 seconds of penalty there or thereabouts to go and serve. So waiting for Kyokudo, your race leader, to dive down into the pits is on the overcut now, as Ivan comes in from 4th position right now out on track. All but 4 drives have been lapped so far in this event, but Ivan here doing a good job. The one thing that you would say right now from Ivan's style of driving is that it is consistent, and sometimes consistency is so very, very key when it comes to a season.
Yeah, that's always the thing. And, I think Ivan is pretty much what you would want in a normal endurance racer. These guys, of course, they are the best of Malta, and Kyokudo now for a very late lunch into the pits, still staying on the same lap, in the same lap as Ivan. Ivan, I think he's gonna make it without being lapped. So, yeah, of course he's lacking a little bit of pace compared to Windy, Mikhail, and Kyokudo, but for the rest of the guys, you know, he's quite a bit ahead as well. I think he's in that perfect middle, and for sprint races, he's usually not one to drop off so far. So I think maybe he has just gone with his wrong strategy call for these races.
Out and away goes Kyrkado, regaining the race lead here in this one. What's the gap, though? As they cross the line, it is 10 seconds still, and gaining, dropping here on the brakes into turn one. This will be the real difference maker. It's 9 seconds exactly. So 9 seconds, 9.5 minutes. That's going to be a tall order to catch, and it's going to have to rely on that internalized pressure in terms of this race to make something happen of this. And really, you could say at this point in time, there aren't many vehicles that are going to pose any real worries here to Kyoto. Blue flags are always respected when it comes to this series, and these drivers of the Malta Motorsport Federation, of course, which is part of the sponsorship and all of the rest of the event, which is brought to you by Kyoto here, has just got to do one thing: keep it on the island, because any small mistake means sharks.
Yeah, that is definitely the case now. It was 10 seconds before, and that undercut really seems to be the absolute optimum strategy in these races at the moment. You almost have a 2-minute lap, and in that 2-minute lap, on new tires, you can gain a second or maybe even more. So that is quite a bit of time that you can gain from worn tires on new tires. And yeah, it overall seems that Kyoto, he is able to sort of raise his pace again now. But Mikael, of course, on new tires, both of them now, he is able to keep that pace. And I think Kyoto is now within that easy range of when he makes a mistake, it's going to cost him dearly if everything goes wrong. And Mikael knows this.
There's traffic in front, of course. That's the man in 6th position here in this race at the moment. He is 9.3 behind the Vision Gran Turismo Toyota at this stage in time. And actually something to talk about here with Vision Gran Turismo. That's been something where we've seen that all those VGT cars look absolutely fantastic. They were futuristic designs, people wanting to try and experiment with maybe some wacky designs, some crazy designs. I know there was some retro designs of some really cool ideas and concept cars, especially the Nike design. That was something that was really interesting in terms of how you'd have to drive it almost on all fours, I think, is the way that they wanted to pilot it. And you pilot it almost like a plane with two hands, like a fighter pilot. So that would have been very interesting as they come to life reality. But at the moment, there is more penalty for... Oh, my goodness me. It's 8.4. Are we going to try and set a record here for how much penalty you can have at any one time?
He has a lot of, he has a lot of cushion to the rear, so he can get a second picnic blanket out and, yeah, just invite everyone.
Back-to-back picnics, anybody? That would be quite nice at this stage. Wendy Boy with 8.4 seconds of penalty left to serve here in this event on lap 43 of this one going on right now. Everybody looking to push towards the end of this one. Not a million miles away now. 6.5 minutes going to be coming up on the clock. And this is Kyoto here just having to negotiate away past the Aston Martin, and does so with the Aston deciding just to go straight on a little bit, hit the brakes and say, you know what, it's yours, I'm a lap down, I've been thoroughly beaten over the course of this race, and now only a number of laps remain, and it's around about 5 that we're looking at the moment. Whoa, where are you going? Position number 9, Sasha going for a little bit of a ride through the grass.
Yeah, it seems to be that a few guys are still getting caught out by this little bend just before turn 1. When it was actually redesigned, I think... Oh, that is actually well before the bend. Yeah, I think someone may have gotten a bit of a victim. He became a victim of attrition, I think. Not just, physically, but also maybe mentally. Because we are, of course, at the end of 90 minutes of driving. And no real break other than the 10 seconds of pit stop that you have.
Arguably, you could say that makes endurance racing here on Gran Turismo even more difficult around this place. But it's so easy just to say, look in a direction and go, oh yeah, I want that, and then and almost do what you'd say is the learner-driver strategy of you go where your eyes go, and you start turning into a place and going on through. I know that my father actually ran into a very, very similar situation, almost beaching a car on a hairpin because he was not looking at the road, but was more rather looking at someone on the pavement. So that was a thing. But ultimately, this has been a race where you could say it has been written in the stars from about lap number 1.5 here in this one. You couldn't really say it was always going to be a runaway. It hasn't been a runaway, but 10 seconds from Mikael, who's been pushing over the course of those stints. Ultimately, what's the key of this one? Over the last hour of the race, that gap has only fluctuated by 2 seconds. That is a win for Mikael. But it's those 8 seconds at the beginning where Kyoto really started to attack, build a buffer margin that you could say the race was won and lost.
Yeah, I think that is still that bit that Mikael has to perfect in his driving. At the start, he has to be a little bit more aggressive, I think, because right now, I think Kyoto is not quite giving everything. I think he is controlling the pace here. And that is just something that you can just easily do when you are just, driving ahead. Of course, I think the undercut caught him out a little bit because Mikael had been on a different strategy for pretty much the entire race. But of course, as long as you have a couple seconds gap, you can always still keep out a little bit of a pace, and when you're actually gauging your enemy over the entire race, you can just sort of start getting a feel to how fast they are, where their mistakes are, how the gap is developing, and it's just really impressive from Kyoto how he is always able to pull that off.
And it's just almost a case of time and time again, just finding a level, finding something that works, and then again and again and again, making sure that becomes the reality when it has come to racing so far. And maybe this is the time where we start looking at, okay, well, how is this going to play out into the larger sphere of racing out there at the moment? Of course, we've got the Nations Cup and the Manufacturers Cup, which has been so very, very vital to Gran Turismo, of course, licensed with the FIA in terms of their championships. But what has been key with those is that it has brought a level right up to the top. And if you talk about nations which have been strong in sim racing, Australia's got a fantastic system available to them at the moment. Are you short a little bit potentially? Are you coming in for a splash and dash because you're short for a lap? And that could be a big, big turning point here in this one overall. Mikael here is going to have to try and make a real push. 11 seconds in terms of the stop. This is going to be close here. And no, it's not actually. It's going to be down to 4 seconds. So that was a safety buffer pit stop from Kyoto. That was hearts in mouths sorts of stuff that we just saw right there. Nobody expected Kyoto to be thinking about, shorts on fuel, and would be very grateful for the system of pit lane entry and exit on Gran Turismo Sport.
Really confused, to be honest there. I absolutely did not expect that. With 23%, he should be able to do the last couple laps, but I think he just went for new tires because maybe he had a couple mistakes in it while we weren't looking, and just wanted to go for sure. Maybe also like starting to see how long it would take him without refueling to just change the tires.
And of course as well, that's also useful information for events going on, say for round 2, round 3 and round 4 of the championship. Mikael there in second position right now. We'll be looking at that going, did you really have to pit? You're going to dangle that carrot on a stick just that much closer to me in terms of this event? Get me that close to you at the front? It gives a little hope, but it's just that, a little hope. Lost time in terms of that pit stop was only 5 seconds in terms of the race. So that really just says all you need to know. Mikael is unable to get close enough to really attack, to really make everything a reality. And ultimately, it has not played out the way that he has wanted to at this stage. Kyoto then will go for one more lap of this race, Nicholas. And really, there is no catching at this point.
Yeah, especially on new tires now. I think that he has this pretty much settled. it would be the weirdest thing if commentator's curse struck right now, wouldn't it? But of
Please
course,
don't even entertain that thought after leading almost every lap of this event.
yeah, you never want, you hate to see it when that happens. So it's just, I think he just went for the final lap to do another fastest lap here, to just have that absolute domination if he was already unable to lead every lap of the race. So yeah, Kyokudo completely going for. Oh, that is actually quite a big one. I think that might be a cut penalty. And Windy is the first one to finish, since the laps are now over. Time has run out, and I think Kyokudo is trying to. Oh, there's actually not a cut penalty. That is actually surprising. I think he's really trying to just put another fastest lap out there, and maybe even look into the 53s, which would make him, I think, faster than the quali times.
Yeah, I think that would be a plan here to get close to the 53.7 of his qualification time. Because the time has expired, an hour and a half has gone along, anybody who hits the start-finish line after the 1 hour 30 expires effectively finishes on that lap. So Windy gets classified as being a lap down here technically in this one, and only 2 will effectively be put on the leading lap. Kyokudo has been absolutely sensational over the course of this race. Built a margin early on, worked for it, and then consolidated it. Little scare with the pit stop towards the end, but just a small blip on the radar, trying to find a bit of time through the final chicane, and now to Hyundai End Curve to finish off an hour and a half's worth of racing. There was no way to catch him today. He was just that good. Kyokudo continues on a rich vein of form and wins it in impervious fashion here today at the Nurburgring. Mikael will come home for the second position as some of the final few drivers to make it over towards the start-finish line. That was perfect racing almost from Kyokudo.
Yeah, it was pretty much a perfect race from him. No problems whatsoever in the car performance, and yeah, you could really see how much he had dialed himself in to this car, and it's really impressive to just see that level of domination. Well, pretty much everywhere where he drives, and what else can you do other than just hope that the others improve? I think they also they have a constant learning process of seeing him, adapting, and then trying to find more time and more comfort, and I think, especially since the casual races, it has showed quite a bit though, because when we saw the grand final from the Spa races, Kyokudo was completely untouchable. So he was still pretty much half a second up to a second ahead in qualifying. And we saw this in the Formula race weeks ago, that people could already challenge him. We could see this again and again, and I think before this championship is over, we may see more people challenging him.
Well, it's all about the process, and the process moves now over to Milan, and on the outskirts of Milan is the province of Monza, and Monza is going to be where we head to a speed circuit if ever there was one, and that is coming in 1 week's time. But one day from now, tomorrow is a Wednesday, and Wednesdays mean casual fun. We'll be heading over to Kyalami for 1 hour's worth of racing on R Factor 2. You can catch that on exactly where you have been watching it, be it on motorsport.tv, be it on ESTV or TVM Sport, on, of course, the World Pro Racing YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch as well. If you haven't already, like, share, subscribe, wherever you may be, to get more amazing content from World Pro Racing. But a massive thanks to the team that has been behind this, the likes of Adrian Fagayo and George Muscat, Chief Steward and Chief Race Director. Of course, you've got the likes of Justin and Nathan Mifsud, who have been on the broadcast behind the scenes for us today. Nicholas Hillebrand, Jake Sperry. This is Kyokudo's series. He has absolutely controlled this one from start to finish. But as we all know, when it comes to a series like this, it's about the car. It's about the track. It's about the combination. And how good is that Lexus going to be on raw power when a beast of a BMW will want to try and let the reins just get loose, unleash the chains, and make sure that it is a really perfect battle. We will be catching you in 1 week's time for the HyperX Endurance Series, but tune in tomorrow because we're heading over to South Africa and Kyalami. This event is brought to you by World Pro Racing, the Malta Motorsport Federation, GMR Entertainment, WJ England and Son, Melita, Media Looks, Restream.io, Gaming Malta, VisitMalta.com, and TVM Sport. This stream is powered by Melita, using Melita Gigapower Internet. World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
It's just so dangerous. You're risking not only your life, but also my life.
wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi, assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.